we break out all of the energy options that we have before us, solar, wind, nuclear, biofuels, geothermal, all the options that we could use together or in some combination to replace fossil fuels, we can look way into the future. And if you do, then I think that statement about solar is correct, that yes, ultimately solar energy conversion is the way to go. But the problem is we can't look way into the future. We also have to be thinking, how do we get to, let's say, 5 years down the road? Because we've got to make sure that we're investing both for the short term, the mid-term, and the long term.
As oil prices fluctuate and the cost of heating and cooling your home continues to rise, energy has become an important topic among Nebraskans and politicians. There are concerns about global warming, pollution, and water usage. Some communities are making the effort to be more green. In Nebraska, more and more companies are building ethanol plants. Private companies are making a push for wind and solar power as Nebraska continues to lag behind neighboring states in the creation of renewable energy. But we have something that no other state has. 100% of Nebraska's electric power comes from public sources, not private.
Our electric rates are pretty low compared to the nation. We're in the lowest 10% of the electric rates in the nation.
Nebraska is very unique, traditional public power state. We enjoy some very low rates.
Because our rates are so low, it's the alternate energies aren't all that cost effective.
One of the benefits of that is that we've been able to keep power very reasonable in cost and extremely reliable.
But even with inexpensive public power in Nebraska, there is a great concern about renewable energy. Is ethanol the right choice? Should we begin investing more in wind and solar energy? Should Nebraska build another nuclear power plant? Or should all of these things be a part of our energy plan? These are questions Nebraskans need to be asking as we try to make sure affordable, clean energy will be available for future generations. In 1977, members of the Prairie Astronomy Club in Lincoln decided to build an observatory and give it to the city. The agreement was the city would maintain the building and volunteers would staff it for free. The Hyde Observatory was born, created on the south side of Holmes Lake. In May of 2001, several board members proposed replacing the old heating system and suggested putting in a solar energy system. The board worked with Lincoln Electric to get a grant and installed solar energy in April of 2003.
Well, right now, this system for 4.75 years has produced 40% of our electrical needs. Obviously, at nighttime, we're not producing electricity, so we still draw in from Lincoln's electric grid. But during the daytime, when this facility is closed, not using very much electricity, and the sun is shining brilliantly, like today, then it's generating electricity and it's feeding it back out into the electrical grid.
So far, Hubbell has been pleased with the system. The money savings are real and the maintenance is minimal.
It's really an amazing thing because unlike most other energy generating systems, there are no moving parts here. This is entirely electrons flowing through current. Through the years, I backed off on my maintenance. In the early years, I would get up there with a squeegee brush and I would wash these panels clean till they sparkled. But through the years, I've learned that Mother Nature does the job real well by having a thunderstorm come across now and then and wash them pretty clean.
Hubbell knows the observatory was fortunate to receive a grant, so the startup cost was much less than most people would pay. That cost remains a key factor in solar energy.
There does not seem to be incentive-wise, whether with government grants or government incentives in some way to move into this arena. I believe we could do a lot more if there were. And so I'm hopeful that as the future continues, we will see more and more environmentally conscious methods like this.
Every minute of every day, sunlight provides more energy than the Earth consumes in an entire year. Since the dawn of man, we've been trying to find a way to harness this energy, but with little success. Supporters of solar energy point out that it is a completely renewable energy form, is environmentally friendly, and can be stored in batteries to be used whenever needed. And solar energy peaks during the summer months, which is a high demand time for electricity. Yet solar continues to dramatically lag behind wind, nuclear, and ethanol in Nebraska in both production and popularity. One of the issues surrounding solar energy is how quickly people can get their investment back and actually begin saving money. Even the experts disagree.
A system like this, it does the space heating as well as the hot water needs, and we're talking somewhere around $16,000. After the tax rebate, $14,000. We're looking at probably a payback of 6 to 7 years.
If you could put a system on a home that would generate half their energy for $10,000, we'd be selling them all day long. But most homes in Nebraska use a lot of energy, and then it would take, you know, more like $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 worth of solar to actually reduce their bill a significant amount. Most of the paybacks are going to be 50 plus years.
We're seeing paybacks with if you couple the tax incentives that exist at the federal level today. In our case, we do have some tax rebates in Colorado. So you're seeing cost recovery in about 3 years, 3 to 4. Where without any of those, it might be a 20-year project.
Colorado created a mandate through a grassroots movement of the people that requires 10% of all energy in the state to come from renewable resources by 2015. Bowman says without that mandate, nothing would be happening with renewable energy in Colorado.
So I'm unapologetic for mandates. There is a absolutely appropriate place for government to say we can set a foundation, we can set a bar that everybody's going to have to meet. How you get there, you can use the technology you want. We're not, government isn't mandating that it has to be wind or it has to be solar, it has to be geothermal, but they can say we are going to expect X out of you. You go figure out how to do it.
I get very concerned when we engage in mandates. We may agree with this mandate because that's good for us. And then what happens to the next group comes in and they've got a mandate I don't agree with. Philosophically, how can I say one mandate's good and others not?
The state of Nebraska, it doesn't offer any incentives. And it doesn't look like they're going to offer them anytime soon from the attitude that we've seen from our state senators.
Another issue for solar energy is something called net metering, where power companies agree to buy back excess energy. People differ on just how this program works.
We got 42 states in this country that offer what we call net metering. They actually buy electricity back from whoever's offering it, either from solar photovoltaic or wind.
In Nebraska, they buy it from you at a lower than wholesale rate. They call it a voided rate. So it's usually 1.5 to 2 cents, and you might be paying as much as 8 cents or something for your kilowatt hours.
Then we pay them at our wholesale fuel rate, which is less than the retail rate because the retail rate has other costs that we have to pass along to the homeowner.
LES here in Lincoln says they offer net metering, but it's a ridiculous program. They only offer 2.5 cents for every kilowatt, where you're paying 8 cents.
We had a public hearing in February of 2007, and we had 20 customers come and talk about net metering, and we modified our policy according to what they told our board of directors, and since then I've heard only positive comments.
I mean, our energy's cleaner than their energy. They should be paying us a premium, but we would settle for the same amount.
I think we're just on the cutting edge technologically of finding ways that solar can be a part of the answer in a significant way, not a 1% way, but in a significant way.
Well, I certainly hope we do some breakthroughs and come up with some really fantastic and fun things in photovoltaics. I think that holds probably the most promise in renewable energy. Today it costs about $5 a watt to buy photovoltaic cells. I think when that gets to 5 cents a watt, then we'll have a hard time figuring out where to put them all.
In 1982, 2 Montessori teachers from Lincoln decided to create a new learning environment for grade school students. It embraced the Montessori method of learning, which is an aid to life rather than a specific curriculum of educational objectives. They find ways to get the children to participate in things like meal preparation, cleaning, gardening, and taking care of the earth and protecting it. So they bought some land near Roca and with 6 students started the Prairie Hill Learning Center. It now has 66 students and continues to grow. Plus, it's added a new learning tool, renewable energy.
We designed the building for this building to be totally free from needing other electricity. And if there's extra electricity, if we're generating more than that building can use, especially like weekends or low energy use times, then we can send it to our other buildings. And eventually, if we have still more energy left over, we can send it back to the electric company and they can use it somewhere else.
The Prairie Hill Learning Center, they came to us about 4.5 years ago, and they wanted to be the first school in Nebraska to use renewable energy to power their facilities and reduce their energy. They wanted to do a solar electric system, so they had solar panels. They're going to make electricity, put it right into the utility, and then they wanted to add a wind generator, also make electricity and put it right into the fuse panel of the building and reduce their load.
The wind turbine, it's powered by the wind, and and then it goes through these. It goes back there, and then it gets transferred into electricity.
When it's not sunny out and it's windy, then the wind turbine helps us get energy, and when it's not windy and it's sunny out, then the solar panels help us get energy, and it just helps us use less electricity.
These solar panels, when the sun comes, they take the light and turn it into energy.
It took the school about 4 years to come up with the money for the solar panels and the wind turbine. It was a combination of fundraising, grants, and a low-interest loan from the USDA. But it's already saving money. Energy bills at the school are as much as 75% less than they were at this same time last year.
For the month of July, it was a fourth of what it had been last July. So that was really drastic, we thought.
The students don't know a lot about how this new system works, but they are learning. And they love to show off the fancy gadgets in their new environmentally produced building.
What do these boxes do?
They tell us when the wind turbine or the solar panels are doing okay. I don't really know about this one, but I do on this one. When this is fault or reset, you have to push this button.
It takes longer than some traditional forms of energy, but it will pay for itself in the future. Plus, how do you put a value on what the children are learning?
Windmills have dotted the horizon in rural Nebraska, pumping water for as long as anyone can remember. Most of those windmills are no longer working, but continue to be a reminder of the value wind can play in making our lives easier. In the past 15 years or so, wind has become a hotly debated issue, and whether or not it should be part of our energy program.
Wind energy is a positive. I want to see more wind energy. But we also have to realize there's just inherent physics that are involved in wind energy that doesn't make it the panacea, the silver bullet that everyone says.
Wind is actually a form of solar energy. It's created from the sun's uneven heating patterns of the earth when cooler air moves across land or water. A study in 2007 showed Nebraska 6th in the nation for wind energy potential. However, Nebraska ranks 18th in actual development of wind energy.
People talk about, well, why don't we have more wind energy? But not in my backyard. We'll let somebody else do it, but I don't want to have these giant windmills down the street from my property.
Nebraska's neighbor Iowa seems to be developing wind energy more quickly. It has 18 times the production and continues to expand, building turbines at a higher pace than Nebraska. One reason for this is Iowa has more private ownership in its public utilities, which means more opportunities for tax credits.
We would not have them without the wind energy tax credit, for the reason that in order to get the investment that it takes, you have to have the tax credit.
For instance, wind development, very strong and new opportunities for wind development in Iowa, our neighbor right next door, way far ahead of us in that regard.
I don't know to what extent Nebraska is lagging behind Iowa. I think it's recognizing that wind energy is a great source of power.
Now, someday, hopefully, we'll get our engineering and use of wind energy and the efficiency of production down to a point where it's economically equal to coal, as an example, and we might not need the tax credit at that point.
A recent article in the Dickinson County News in Iowa says the state's population is beginning to worry about land issues when it comes to building wind farms. While the situation has not been resolved, many are still concerned about how wind turbines will affect Iowans in the future. A key component of wind energy is the cost, as transmission lines are needed from windy areas of the country to high-demand electricity markets. Those lines can cost up to $2 million per mile.
You have to have the transmission system, the big wires and the big poles, in order to get the energy here.
Transmitting that energy over a couple hundred miles, you lose some of the energy. And you have to build power lines or hope that there's room on the existing power lines. And if you put a lot of wind out west, then you're going to take up all the excess that might be on the power lines.
About 5 miles south of Ainsworth, on 11,000 acres of land, stands Nebraska's largest wind farm. The NPPD facility has 36 turbines, each standing 230 feet tall. It's an impressive sight in the Nebraska Sandhills as you look across the horizon dotted with turbines, cattle, and old-fashioned windmills.
The location and decision for this area was made primarily because we've been doing testing out here with NPPD, with the Western Area Power Administration, with the Nebraska Power Administration, back since the 1980-81 period, up to date. So KBR, we've used our radio tower, our site over there, through the last 20 years doing wind sites, wind studies. And this site has shown to be a very, very good wind site.
Another key issue with wind power is the inconsistency. If the wind blew 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the turbines would do a great job. But that's not how it works.
Under full capacity, meaning that if all 36 turbines were running at 100% of the time, I think it's like 19,000 homes. But that may only last for an hour because wind is a very, very fluctuating energy source.
Until you've been there and have seen the turbines, you don't realize just how big they are.
This plate probably is huge. Yeah. There's a lot of plates there. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
One of the challenges with wind energy is where the wind blows the best, there aren't as many transmission lines. And so we are now in the Sandhills in Nebraska here at Ainsworth, and there aren't very many customers here. More of the customers are in the bigger cities.
Richard says before the end of the year, there will be 10 different monitoring stations across the state to see which locations are likely to be the most efficient.
After a year's worth of data collection at those stations, we'll be able to rank the 10 sites and select the best of those 10. And then we'll proceed from there forward for developing more wind within Nebraska.
While the Ainsworth Wind Farm is the largest of its kind in Nebraska, there are other wind farms in the state. The Elkhorn Ridge Wind Farm near Bloomfield, as well as the Wind Project at Kimball, operated by the Municipal Energy Agency of Nebraska, both supply electricity to Nebraska residents. Wind seems to be the fastest developing renewable energy method in Nebraska. But as most experts agree, wind is only part of the overall answer when it comes to renewable energy.
If you can imagine a car being driven with the pedal to the metal 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's the type of reliability we expect and get out of that plant.
I do think it's renewable energy. First of all, we're using, yes, radiation, whether it's uranium or whatever, but that can be reused as well. And so once we figure out how to make it a recyclable product, reusable product, then it is renewable in my mind.
When people hear the words nuclear energy, it tends to conjure up negative images. We might think of the disaster at Chernobyl or the partial meltdown at 3 Mile Island. Opponents of nuclear energy say, what's going to happen with all of the waste material these plants produce? Will it be safe? What should we do with it? But supporters of nuclear energy point out it provides a large amount of electricity without the direct creation of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide.
And the best thing about nuclear is there's zero emissions. So as we talk about global warming, and we're concerned about global warming, the best way of producing mass amounts of electrical generation cleanly is nuclear.
Would you agree that there's still going to be some level of nuclear waste that has to be properly contained, that probably will cost a significant amount of money, that needs to be contained for a long time? Would you agree for that?
That's absolutely true, and there will be a long-term cost, and the maintenance required becomes very, very minimal because it's in such an inert state.
Why should we build nuclear power plants which when we can build wind turbines with roughly the same equivalency in power?
Go ahead. If you were to derive the same amount of energy out of a wind facility in Nebraska using about that 40% capacity factor, to equal Cooper's output, you'd have to have about 1,000 wind turbines to match the amount of electrical energy.
One of the issues related to that is that there is no good way to store electrical energy. And so that has a huge, huge problem.
Do you see that possibly Nebraska's investment in nuclear energy and this increase, maybe even if that happens nationwide, that Nebraska itself might be centered as an area of possibly a good site a waste disposal site?
I think as a nation we have to somehow come together and find the political courage to solve these types of problems.
There are 439 nuclear plants operating worldwide, which provide about 16% of the world's electricity. There are 104 plants in the United States. Nebraska has 2, providing about 34% of the electricity for the state.
It is the safest, the cleanest source of energy we have. And we could be doing that in far bigger ways than we are now using nuclear.
Nuclear power, we're finding out today, is pretty safe. It's efficient, it's affordable, it's available. 20 years ago, there were folks in Congress who would love to have shut down the entire nuclear power industry.
Before the end of this decade, France will be almost 100% nuclear in generation of its electricity. More and more of the European countries are moving to nuclear.
It takes about 20 years to build a plant, so we are behind. I mean, you take France, they're well ahead of us in terms of nuclear power, and I can't say that I like that.
But again, it's a regulation issue, it's siting issues, it takes time to build a nuclear power plant.
There is a debate going on as to the proper role that nuclear power is going to play in the future. In fact, some who have been a part of what's been known as the traditional environmental movement have begun to embrace nuclear power.
The Fort Calhoun plant has about 18 years left on its license, and they're already looking at replacing it with coal. And I asked them point blank, why won't you replace a nuclear plant with a nuclear plant? And they said, well, A, the permitting process is just horrendous. It takes millions of dollars to get through it, if you get through it. But number two, the capital expenses for a nuclear plant are incredible.
Of course, the dilemma is what to do with the spent fuel. And again, that's the primary concern, because that's difficult to deal with. And that question is not resolved, and frankly I think it holds us back from more aggressive considerations of nuclear. If you could prevent it from falling into the wrong hands and then becoming material that could be used for nuclear weapons, or if somehow technology could advance where it could be recycled so that it is being disposed of in a more proper way than it currently is, you may see an increased emphasis on nuclear.
There is no question nuclear will continue to be a part of the energy mix in Nebraska for a long time. But the questions are, how much? And would it be feasible to create an additional nuclear power plant in the state? These and many more are questions Nebraskans will have to answer in the very near future. T. Boone Pickens is a billionaire oil man from Texas. He says American dependence on foreign oil must stop, and the U.S. must find other ways to produce energy.
We're now paying for foreign oil about $700 billion a year. $700 billion.
Pickens wants to reduce that $700 billion to $400 billion in 10 years. His complex solution requires an increase in wind power. In fact, he wants 22% of America's power to come from wind. That will replace all of the natural gas we are presently using to produce power for homes and businesses. He then wants natural gas to power cars and trucks.
Natural gas is the only other in our list here that can do anything about this number.
But there are some issues with his plan. Finding ways to get vehicles to run on natural gas and getting nationwide distribution is one problem. Getting government help to distribute energy from the wind corridor across the country is another. And he needs individuals or businesses to invest in wind turbines and convince landowners to put them on their property. But Pickens is putting his money where his mouth is. He's investing over $700 million in wind turbines in West Texas, which will be delivered in early 2010.
We're going to win this battle, and I see it as a war, but we're not going to lose any people. But it's like a war, and when you can get this many people in Lincoln at 10:30 in the morning, I think that's good.
Pickens believes ethanol is operating at capacity here in the United States. However, there are those who disagree.
T. Boone Pickens is a very wealthy, powerful individual, and right now he's touting, wind farms for electrical generation, which of course we can't put in our cars yet. And he wants to use natural gas for the liquid fuel. I don't know how much natural gas Mr. Pickens owns, but I would guess it's a large number, so I think he may have a bit of a conflict of interest in his own program there. Ethanol can absolutely do more. As corn yields go up, the estimates I hear are that by 2030 we're going to be doubling the yields that we get out of an acre of corn.
Miller says since those corn yields are increasing, the U.S. will be able to increase ethanol production and not affect food products. Plus, there's another player in this game.
As cellulosic ethanol comes online, we're going to be able to turn more of what we have in the corn kernel right now into fuel, into alternative foods. We return 100% of the protein we pull in with corn back to the food market through the cattle feed market, which is where it would go in if we didn't use it to get the carbohydrates out.
Agriculture is being asked to provide food, feed for livestock, fiber. Now we're being asked to provide energy. And we only have so much land on which we can do that. So how are we going to utilize our land base to do that?
The ability to grow more corn on a per acre basis is phenomenal. It has grown by leaps and bounds thanks to breeding technology, thanks to biotechnology.
In 1990, only 900 million gallons of corn ethanol were produced in the U.S. By 2006, that figure reached 5 billion gallons, with Nebraska producing 543 million gallons. Only Illinois and Iowa produced more.
Wherever we put up an ethanol plant, it's 40 to 50 new jobs. It's all about jobs, keeping our young people in the state, particularly those who are interested in farming and ranching and agriculture.
Yeah, you know, we always like to think that there's probably no state better situated to take advantage of the corn to ethanol to distillers grains to cattle and cattle processing than Nebraska is.
So I think it passes a lot of tests. If you were mainly concerned about whether or not this is good for a rural community and you lived in that community, you would quickly come to the conclusion this has been a great economic catalyst. So it probably gets a pretty good report card grade in that category.
My sense of it is that the ethanol debate is entirely about politics and has nothing to do with economics or environmental causes or anything of the kind. Politicians are first and foremost interested in being reelected. And so when they make decisions, when they cast votes, they are primarily interested in how that vote's going to affect their election.
Jerry Taylor and Douglas Durante have spent quite a bit of time debating the ethanol issue.
Does he want a subsidy? Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think he got a grant from DOE, so yeah.
Good job. Ethanol is no different from most other welfare programs. It provides a government check to some party, and then it charges everyone else to pay for that. So no, it's not at all different.
Energy just affects every person in this country, and it comes right out of your pocket, and anything we can do to reduce energy costs saves you money. So I can't think of a better place to use it.
A charge for the industry then would be to persuade people to voluntarily buy their product because it keeps money in the United States as opposed to sending money abroad, or that it helps revive rural America.
Suggestions that it be a completely free market, and if ethanol is competitive, let it compete. But I don't think gasoline and petroleum products really are a free market. I don't think they operate in a free market. I think even modest studies suggest that there's a serious additional cost on top of whatever oil is, whether it's $5 a barrel, $100 a barrel. There's another $5 or $20 or $50, depending on what study you look at on top of that.
And so if you just want to talk a little bit on the CRP enrollments, and if it's something that you think is important or what it means to the state. So I guess if you could light on that.
I will disagree with you on 2 points right at the outset. One is your statement that biofuels are driving up corn prices. That's one factor, but we've seen a number of different factors ranging from drought that was mentioned earlier, ranging to the weakened U.S. dollar, which has increased exports significantly beyond biofuels use. There's a whole host of factors that are driving up corn prices. Second, I think it's important to take a look at the other assumption that you stated, which is inaccurate, and that's in terms of corn plantings. I don't think we're seeing a lot more new acres planted. I think we're seeing land use, economic use issues come to play, and economics are going to be the key thing that dictates whether or not we're going to have land set aside. So there's going to be a big decision-making process that, given higher land taxes, given more demands for energy, higher input costs for agriculture, are those same farmers that have the option of keeping that land idle going to be properly incentivized so that that becomes an economic decision for them?
What are the economic and political barriers to the growth of cellulosic ethanol at this point?
One of the things that's been very important is that we've been able to demonstrate through technology and the evolution that goes with that technology that there's a real opportunity here to move beyond corn, and I believe we're seeing an opportunity to do that.
There are also some political barriers, though, and ones that perhaps don't get talked about a great deal, is that cellulosic ethanol will initially be established probably mostly in places outside of the Corn Belt area we're in now.
This is a switchgrass plant that obviously it's looks dead now, but this is just dead tissue. In the spring, this would
Ken Vogel likes switchgrass. It's a native prairie grass found east of the Rocky Mountains. It's mostly grazed by livestock and planted to help in water conservation efforts. But Vogel thinks it has great potential in the world of renewable energy.
We're developing switchgrass for use on marginal cropland as an energy crop. We're not developing it for use on our best farmland. We don't think it will be economical to grow it on our best cropland, but on some of our poorer cropland, erosive soil, such as what's currently in the Conservation Reserve Program, this species can do quite well. A lot of the energy costs involved with corn, where you have to plant it and harvest it every year. This one, once you plant it, you have it, and then you only go back and harvest it once a year.
When you look at the numbers, switchgrass seems perfect. It has high yield potential, can be grown in areas not suitable for corn, and produces 5 times the energy than it takes to produce it. But right now, the cost is just too great to extract the sugar needed to produce ethanol.
This is a switchgrass stem, and it could be a corn stalk. And it's basically it's composed of complex carbohydrates that are hooked together with some complex bonds. And it takes more effort to break those down into simple sugars that can be fermented to ethanol. And the technology of breaking this material down into simple sugars is where there's been a lot of work done the last 20 years, and it's being close to being implemented.
6 pilot programs will be set up across the country to produce switchgrass-based ethanol. They'll produce about 10 million gallons of ethanol a year. But Vogel says we have to be realistic. There's only so much land to go around.
Well, we think on some of these marginal soils or erosive sites that this type of a plant, it may not be switchgrass, it may be a perennial, may be the best use of that land resource. We don't think it will be used on our best farmland. We think our best farmland needs to be used for food production.
Right now, what works the best is obviously corn. That's what, over 90% of the ethanol production now is obviously coming from corn because it works the best. We've done the most research over the number of years, but there will be, and there has to be, other renewable forms of energy. So.
The federal government has already begun investing in the process of creating ethanol from cellulosic material. A $17 million plant in York is using a variety of products to convert cellulosic material into ethanol.
And we have gone all the way from bench scale research up to our pilot plant, which is a demonstration on a larger than laboratory basis and is the step between laboratory and full-scale commercial production.
Rob is also concerned about the cost of converting the material into ethanol. He says it's more expensive than corn-based ethanol, but he won't say just how much more. He is sure that facilities like this one are going to pave the way for the future of ethanol.
We need the operational experience of running these types of facilities to know how to design future facilities that, as we would deploy this type of technology, will be cost competitive with grain ethanol. It's just doing it, and that's the point we are now.
Rob is also convinced that while corn is currently the crop of choice for ethanol, things will change, and that should be helpful in controlling grain prices and making the best use of the land.
There is a lot of expansion left for ethanol from grain, but once you get to a point, you can no longer expand and produce more ethanol from grain because of the competitive uses for grain. Animal feed, human food, whatever you want to think about. There are other uses for the grain products, but that will not produce near enough ethanol to meet our needs to get us into a situation where we're truly less reliant on people from countries that don't tend to like us a lot of the times.
But given what we know, there's no particular reason to be optimistic. There is no commercially operable cellulosic ethanol plant on planet Earth for a reason. It's too expensive. How expensive is hard to say. We have some pilot projects where we have public-private partnerships and experimental facilities. What production costs are there and how they would translate into the market is very hard to figure out.
Ken Vogel says UNL and other researchers will continue to look for ways to help solve our energy needs. Both corn and cellulosic ethanol will probably be a part of that solution.
If you look at what the energy needs are of the United States, there's never going to be a time where we're going to have enough agriculture products that we can have everybody running everything off of ethanol. there's just not enough material if we want to eat.
Yep, just pretty much like they are right now.
A new generation is preparing itself to take over the Shovel Dot Ranch deep in the Nebraska Sandhills. Homer Buell and his brother Larry are the fourth generation of ranchers on a plot of land founded by their great-grandfather, Benjamin Franklin Buell, in 1883. They will soon be handing over the operation to their children.
This is the original homestead here. This area. These trees would, some of these trees would have been planted clear back when they homesteaded here. So.
The Buells grow some corn and hay and have a few horses, but their major focus?
Myself, I like working with cattle. That's what I like to do.
In a lot of ways, the ranch operates as it did 100 years ago. But some things are different. One of those things is how they feed their cattle.
Now, we do buy and feed a lot of the co-products that come out of the ethanol plants. We started, I'm guessing a little bit here, and it's always longer than you think, but 12 years ago, approximately 10 to 12 years ago. We feed a lot of hay to our, and hay that we raise to our calves. Some of it gets rained on or whatever, and it's not as good a quality. Now, if we take one of the co-products that comes out of a few of the plants, it's called a corn syrup. It's pretty thick. Cattle really like it. So we can put that product, mix it with a feed wagon in with that poor quality hay and feed it to calves.
Ranching is a complicated scientific process. The Buells keep individual records on every cow and every calf on the ranch.
When we wean the calves, like these calves we wean today, they're just going to graze till early November. Then in the middle of November, we'll bring all those cattle in and we sort them for weight. We weigh everything. So we'll feed all those cattle based upon the gain, so they'll be a certain weight when we market them. So these are the tanks. We've got 3 of these tanks in here that we store. I don't know how your lights, but this is what we store the corn, what we call corn syrup.
These trucks are very, very simple to run. You leave your door shut, and that is the mixing process. And when you open up the feed, then it comes out for the cattle. But this will mix it. You have scales here on the outside, you have scales here on the inside, so everything is weighed into the feeder wagon. Even got a horn.
Times are challenging for the Buells, as they are for all Nebraska ranchers and farmers. High fuel and energy prices, combined with fluctuating prices of both corn and beef, make the profit margin tight. In the past, cattle ranchers had some issues with ethanol plants because of the demand for corn.
There is positives for me, there is a positives for a lot in the industry. But on the other side, that is an input, especially in the feedlot industry, because they want to get a higher gain, so they want to feed more energy, so they feed the corn. And corn prices have went up, as you mentioned, and so that raises the cost of gain for those people. And I can remember back, it had to be at least 10 years ago, maybe longer, 15, setting in some tax meetings at the Nebraska Cattlemen and saying, with the ethanol people there, and we were very supportive of all, of doing things to help that industry grow and get better. But the time needs to come, sometime down the road, when they'll compete in a free market where they're there because the demand is there, they can be profitable, and don't always have to have these things to prop them up, so to speak.
Two-thirds of the earth is covered in water. Here in the Midwest, though, water is at a premium. There's an argument that ethanol factories are using too much of that resource, not leaving enough for farmers.
I don't think that Nebraskans consider water the most precious and beloved natural resource, because if they did, they wouldn't support the subsidies associated with using it.
That's like any resource. It's got to be allocated. And, we hear concerns that if all of these plants went through and tapped into, these reserves or the various places where water is, we would run out.
The fact is, ethanol does use a lot of water. Now, normally that wouldn't bother someone like me. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. I'm not a Greenpeace member. I don't work at the Sierra Club. If you tell me, gee, ethanol uses a lot of water, Under circumstances where people were paying market prices, I wouldn't care whether it did or not.
There's this suggestion sometimes that there's going to be this, the gun's going to go off and the gates open, everybody rushes and takes all these resources, be it corn or be it water or be it anything else. It's got to be a good business decision.
In fact, I think you can make a fairly strong case that ethanol only makes sense until you've drained out these groundwater aquifers, which is going to be a greatly accelerated project under ethanol subsidies.
We need fuel. We need energy. We need liquid transportation fuel. If it's not going to be ethanol, it's going to be petroleum-based, so at least for the foreseeable future. So either way, we need that water, and we need to process it, and all I can say is that if it's not a wise use of resources, which should be decided by whatever the local water authority is, and it's not a good business decision in terms of reasonably priced water and access to it, then maybe we shouldn't build an ethanol plant there.
Food versus fuel is a debate that arises when the topic of ethanol is brought up. The argument is that by growing more corn with its higher cost, we are growing less of other food products, causing the price of food to go higher.
Blamed ethanol for raising the price of corn and raising the cost of food. It's nonsense.
The food to fuel is just nonsense. We need to do both. There's no reason we can't grow more corn and have it available.
Well, first and foremost, most of the corn we grow is a number 2 yellow dent used for livestock feed and for all forms of livestock and for the production of ethanol. It's not a food grade corn that consumers eat.
I think ethanol advocates have been very careful over time to not say this is the answer. I think the analogy is pretty good by saying, ethanol is not the silver bullet, but it's part of the silver buckshot that we need if we're going to solve the energy dilemma in the United States.
Ethanol seems to be here to stay and has become an integral part of the economy in many states. Most people would agree that corn ethanol is not going to be the permanent solution. We have to find other kinds of cellulosic material that can be turned into ethanol. So making a determination about what to do with ethanol production is difficult. Issues surrounding renewable energy are still creating more questions than answers. With Nebraska's low energy rates, it's difficult to invest in technologies that may cost us money in the short term, but could help us save some of our natural resources in the long term and perhaps lessen our energy dependence on foreign countries. We as a state must make some difficult decisions as we look into the future and assess our energy needs for the next 50 years.
We're in a great position vis-a-vis other states, other countries of the world. And it's in understanding that and looking forward that we can be successful. And in a world where it is competitive, the biggest risk to Nebraska is that we're sitting back doing nothing.
We're consuming today about 86 million barrels of oil a day. America uses more than 20 million of those a day. We're about 70% dependent on foreign sources of oil. So we are going to be forced into essentially a crash program, which we've not done yet, into renewables and alternative sources.
I think society and man needs to worry about developing renewable energy. So I'm most excited about the amount of energy it'll save for future generations. And I think that ought to be our primary focus in the energy business, is to make sure that there's some left for somebody else later on.
Everything made sense, the answers weren't so hard to see. Summer skies can fade. Show.